This is part 2 of winning execution for breakaway growth. In part 1, we talked about that the world is hyperdynamic, that growth is increasingly a zero-sum game, competitive advantage is more transient, and you can no longer count on the global economic picture to give you organic growth. To go after breakaway growth, growth that's not merely defending the core and taking advantage of trends, but growth that's taking you into new opportunity arenas, the more that you go after breakaway growth, the more that you're facing uncertainty, and that gives you the horns of the dilemma, because as we discussed, existing processes like Stage-Gate and return on investment don't work well under conditions of uncertainty, and the human factor doesn't work well under conditions of uncertainty. So what can I do? We can make use of uncertainty because the competition is not likely to. In making use of uncertainty, we start to appreciate that we're going to learn to play two different games. The defend the core game, where the processes are aimed at keeping us in sync, a high level of predictability, a high level of control. And then we're going to be learning to play a new game called breakaway. And breakaway growth is more whitewater, turbulence. And some of that whitewater can be a class 2 or a class 3 rapid. And some of that whitewater can be a class 5, very dangerous rapids. In this particular talk, I'm talking about areas of growth that are more class 2, class 3, class 4 rapids. Class 5 rapids are really a very entrepreneurial model, and that's a subject for a different conversation. So if we take a look at what the DNA is of winning execution, we want to do gene splicing. We want to insert into our existing processes the genetic material that will enable us to deal with this VUCA world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The first thing we do is we think in terms of bold opportunities and then how to make those bold opportunities practical. Bold opportunities are not immediately fully practical. This is in contrast to taking practical opportunities and then try to make them bold. Second aspect of gene splicing is agility. And verbs for agility are about flexibility, being quick, getting customer feedback, iterative, staying lean, using principles, for example, of the lean startup. Then we've got the idea of out-innovating ourselves and out-innovating the competition versus just focusing on innovation. So out-innovating is thinking across the entire spectrum of business value creation. Looking at our financial models, our processes, both core and enabling, the innovation offerings, our delivery systems and channels and customer experience, and finally, looking at our culture. And the fourth aspect of DNA is to mitigate risk versus avoid it. Reduce, prevent, surface, address, limit, mitigate risk versus avoid it. So now let's look at how to insert this new DNA into existing business processes. Lessons from agile software development and the lean startup. And these lessons are being applied and adapted to physical products. And they're addressing real problems that we have, the difficulty in establishing firm requirements up front, that the marketplace is in fact changing very rapidly, and the requirements of customers aren't staying the same. We have significant problems when we're doing commercialization that we don't uncover until late in the game. And finally, we have difficulty killing zombie projects Projects had just seemed to go on and on and on, even though the market opportunity is no longer there. Agile Stage-Gate, the process side of Agile Stage-Gate, it occurs in the context of building a business, not merely developing a product. Second, Agile Stage-Gate is characterized by early, rapid, repetitive iteration with lead customers, and that iteration takes place in a series of time-box sprints. So we adapt the existing Stage-Gate by making it agile, inserting these three aspects into the process. And then we add the people side. The people side of Agile is more critical than the process. We're building projects around empowered, collaborative teams that stay intact. Like a startup, we're really building a business. And we have champions and mentors who expedite formal reviews, debottleneck issues as they arise, debottleneck in real time. So this is Agile Stage-Gate. The next aspect, a typical post-launch, we launch the product, we hand it off to the make and sell organizations, and we launch it at scale and begin to make and sell at scale. And then maybe down the road we'll do a post-launch review. But what we know is, given uncertainty, no plan survives first contact with the marketplace. And how we see that, forecasts are inaccurate and have wide variance, as we talked about. We see it as customer product requirements start evolving immediately as soon as we put an initial product into the hands of customers. We also see that some customers need certain requirements, other customers need other requirements, and a one-size-fits-all solution is no longer the right business model. A best practice is this idea of a multi-stage accelerator. First, we don't launch at scale, we launch to an entry set of customers. Then after we launch, we know we're going to have problems, so we do problem resolution sprints, and we know we're going to learn things from the customer working with our products early stage. And therefore, we're going to plan course adjustment sprints. And then we're going to be planning, expanding, and scaling, and enhancing the product from the entry launch to a product now that crosses the chasm and meets the needs of a broader, more diverse customer base. Multi-stage accelerator. We're learning to think differently, and one of the ways of learning to think differently is it's about getting the business model right, not the business plan. The business plan, we know, won't survive first contact with the customer given the amount of uncertainty. We want to get the business model right. We want to make sure we're playing in a big opportunity space and we're going after the opportunity in a way that's a winnable game. The idea of the business model originated with Peter Drucker back in the late 1980s. He set out to answer the question, who are our customers, what are we providing, how do we reach them, and how do we make money? And the reason he went after these questions is he was observing that very successful companies failed to react to fundamental changes in their markets. From the four questions, he wanted to drive and make explicit the core assumptions. So when something changed in the market regarding a core assumption, people were on the alert to be rethinking the business model. Over the last decade, the business model canvas was developed by Alex Osterwalder and other people in the lean startup area. And as you see, the business model canvas has light green, which is really about revenue, light orange, which is really about the cost structure, blue, which is the ecosystem, the competitive system that the business is going to operate in, and in the bottom we have uncertainties of assumptions, hypotheses, and risks both associated with the cost side of the business model and the revenue side of the business model. The idea is we want to make explicit these uncertainties in all aspects of the business model. Get the business model right, test out the uncertainties, and if the uncertainties don't pan out the way we want them to, then we're going to have to iterate the business model, or in the lean startup language, we're going to make a strategic pivot, which is a fundamental shift in one aspect or another of the business model. So remember, we're going after new opportunity arenas, breakaway growth, plus uncertainty. And we want to optimize the chance of bigger success. We want to limit the risk and downside. And we want to pivot as the market evolves and we learn more. So there's an idea called opportunity engineering and a set of practices. The first aspect of that is everything is a hypothesis until it's proven. And verbs around hypotheses are validate, test, demonstrate. And leaving something as an assumption, that's a bad word. The second thing is in opportunity engineering is risks are mitigated. Avoiding a risk is bad. Limiting, preventing, interrupting risk, bypassing, that's mitigating a risk. And finally, we're going to prioritize hypotheses and risks to attack the most impactful early. It looks something like this. We've got a range of real uncertainties, and each of these circles represents a major uncertainty in prioritized order. So as time goes by, we're operating that the remaining risks are less and less impactful. Now we want to spend first to prioritize and spend against the most impactful risk. Then we want to spend if we pass that risk and the hypotheses. Then we want to spend a little bit more to get at the next one. That's a circuit breaker. That represents at some point in the spend, if we haven't mitigated significant risks or tested all the key hypotheses, that's the maximum amount we're willing to spend without having eliminated the most significant risks. So we might trip a circuit breaker as we go through this. And then we continue to move down the line, mitigating risks. If we succeed, we move on. If we fail, we stop. And this is, again, how we kill the zombies. Two more things in opportunity engineering. One is we crowdsource uncertainties. So we're going to ask lots and lots of people, what do they see as uncertainties, the assumptions, the risks, etc.? And we're going to be very transparent about this. We're going to create a risk register. We're going to make the risk register public. We're going to let people know or management know. These are what we now see as the key risks. This is the priority sequence for resolving it. So we're very transparent. And that gives management, senior management, a higher level of confidence about ventures that have a lot of uncertainty because of the transparency of dealing with risk and hypotheses. In this whole process, there are no easy answers. We need to be prepared for that. It's messy. It's open-ended. It requires new kinds of collaboration. It requires commitment. It requires creative and emotional engagement because at the outset, we're going to be bold and we're not going to be fully practical. There's a power of bringing different lenses. Different people see the world through different lenses. Think about it as if you're using a telephoto lens, you're zooming in with high focus on a narrow field of view, and you're blocking out lots of things, versus a wide-angle lens where you're seeing a broad, big picture, but you're not focused on any one thing. Think of colored lenses. Red lenses are going to filter out red, so if you're looking at a rose through a red lens, you're going to see shades of gray and black. You're not going to see a red rose. Different people bring different perspectives, and we want to engage that in what I call a strategic dialogue. And these represent different color lenses that we want to engage in a strategic dialogue. So we engage a green lens of aspirations, possibilities, and commitment, and talk about the bigness of the opportunity. We want to engage a white lens, facts and knowledge, a red lens, how we feel about this, positive feelings and concerns, fears, anxieties. All of the feelings, the red lens. We want to be looking at where we have real criticism about, is this a good idea? That's black. Let's get out our cautions, our concerns. Then use yellow to be constructive, creative, intuitive in resolving these concerns. And finally, blue represents how are we going to go about organizing this to be successful. So this is a strategic dialogue. The aim of the strategic dialogue is to insert the new genetic material into existing processes we've been talking about in order to mitigate the risk, in order to deal with the VUCA environment. So strategic dialogue becomes an essential bridge to implementing agile, bold, out-innovating, mitigating risk. We started by saying, what can I do? The answer, experiment. Experiment with Agile Stage-Gate, experiment after a launch with a multi-stage accelerator, experiment using business models versus business plans, experiment with opportunity engineering for spending money to de-risk projects along the way, and experiment by having strategic dialogues. If you want further information about winning execution for breakaway growth, I invite you to send me an email. Thank you.